The air hangs heavy with tear gas and fear. On one side, a desperate mass of humanity pushes forward, seeking a new life. On the other, rows of riot gear and barbed wire stand guard, a steel curtain against the tide. This is the Polish border in 2025, a microcosm of a continent wrestling with its soul. For months, the tension has been building. Whispers of a new migrant route through Belarus, engineered by a dictator with a score to settle. Images of families sleeping rough, caught in the crosshairs of a geopolitical game. Then, the dam broke. Poland, once a symbol of liberation from Soviet oppression, finds itself recast as Europe's gatekeeper, tasked with holding the line against a new, more insidious threat: weaponized migration. The stakes have never been higher, the consequences more far-reaching. This is a story about borders, about humanity, about the future of Europe itself. The night of February 18, 2025 will forever be etched in the collective memory of Poland. A young border guard, barely out of his teens, lay dying in the mud, his lifeblood staining the snow crimson. He had been stabbed, they say, by one of the migrants attempting to breach the fence. A tragic accident? Or a calculated act of aggression? The answer hardly mattered. The death, broadcast instantly across social media, ignited a firestorm of grief and rage. Poles, long accustomed to their country's role as a transit point for those seeking a better life, felt a profound shift. The narrative of compassion and solidarity, so carefully cultivated in the wake of the Ukrainian refugee crisis, began to unravel. In homes and cafes across the country, the same questions echoed: how could this happen? Who was to blame? And most importantly, what would be done to prevent it from happening again? The government, already under fire for its hardline stance on migration, faced a defining moment. Their response would have profound implications, not just for Poland but for the entire European project. The government's response was swift and uncompromising. Within days, a state of emergency was declared along the border with Belarus. Thousands of troops were deployed, transforming the once peaceful countryside into a militarized zone. A 2-kilometer exclusion zone was established, barring journalists and aid workers from witnessing the unfolding crisis firsthand. Then came the new laws, passed with lightning speed and little debate. Border guards were granted sweeping powers, including the right to use lethal force against anyone attempting to cross illegally. The right to asylum, enshrined in international law and a cornerstone of the European Union, was effectively suspended for those deemed to have entered Poland illegally. Poland, in the eyes of many, had become a fortress, its gates slammed shut against the outside world. The message was clear: no more. The human cost of this policy, the stories of desperation and suffering playing out in the forests along the border, were deemed secondary to the imperative of national security. Poland's actions sent shockwaves through the European Union. Brussels, already grappling with the perennial challenge of migration, found itself caught between a rock and a hard place. On the one hand, the Commission condemned Poland's violation of international law and its disregard for human rights. On the other hand, they understood the domestic political pressures facing Warsaw and the very real threat posed by Belarus's cynical exploitation of vulnerable people. The debate exposed a deep rift within the EU, a fundamental disagreement about the bloc's values and responsibilities. Was the Union, founded on the principles of solidarity and the free movement of people, obligated to share the burden of migration, or did individual member states have the right to protect their borders, even if it meant turning their backs on those in need? The question of financial and logistical support for Poland's border security measures became a bargaining chip in a high-stakes game of political poker. The EU, wary of setting a precedent that could embolden other member states to adopt similarly harsh policies, offered only lukewarm support. Poland, feeling betrayed by its European partners, dug in its heels, accusing Brussels of hypocrisy and double standards. Across the Oder River, Germany watched the unfolding drama with a mixture of apprehension and déjà vu. The country, still grappling with the political and social aftershocks of the 2015 refugee crisis, found itself once again on the front lines of a migration debate that showed no signs of abating. While the German government officially condemned Poland's actions, there was a palpable sense of unease in Berlin. The far-right Alternative for Germany, AfD party, capitalizing on public anxieties about migration and border security, saw a surge in the polls. Their calls for tougher border controls and restrictions on asylum, once dismissed as fringe rhetoric, began to resonate with a growing segment of the population. Germany, once a beacon of hope for refugees and a vocal advocate for a humane European migration policy, found itself facing a difficult question. Could it afford to be the outlier, the lone voice of compassion in a continent increasingly consumed by fear? The answer, with each passing day, seemed less clear. As the political battle raged on, A very human tragedy was unfolding in the forests along the Polish-Belarusian border. Trapped between the barbed wire fences and the heavily armed guards, thousands of men, women, and children shivered in the cold, their dreams of a better life dashed against the unforgiving reality of Fortress Europe. Human rights groups and aid organizations, their access to the border zone restricted by the Polish government, raised the alarm about the deteriorating humanitarian situation. Reports filtered out of pushbacks, of migrants being forcibly returned to Belarus without any opportunity to claim asylum, in violation of international law. Allegations of violence and abuse at the hands of Polish border guards, while denied by Warsaw, further fueled the controversy. The voices of the migrants themselves, their stories of desperation, hardship, and resilience, were largely drowned out by the cacophony of the political debate. Their plight became a pawn in a geopolitical game, their humanity sacrificed on the altar of national security and political expediency. The Polish border crisis is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a deeper malaise afflicting Europe, a crisis of identity and purpose in a world grappling with the interconnected challenges of globalization, climate change, and mass migration. The events of the past year have exposed the fragility of the European project, the ease with which its founding principles of solidarity and human rights can be eroded by fear and political opportunism. They have also highlighted the growing disconnect between the EU's institutions and the citizens they are meant to represent, a gap that is being exploited by populist forces on both the left and the right. The crisis at the Polish border is a test, a crucible from which Europe will emerge either stronger or irrevocably broken. The choices made in the coming months and years will determine not only the fate of the migrants trapped in the no-man's land between Poland and Belarus, but also the future of the European project itself. Will Europe rise to the challenge, reaffirming its commitment to human rights and the rule of law, even in the face of adversity? Or will it succumb to the siren song of nationalism and xenophobia, retreating behind its borders and abandoning its founding ideals? The answer, for now, remains unwritten.